Hello, welcome back to Tabletop 24. I'm on the UKG show floor and I am with Toby, who is Head of Marketing and Distribution for the UK for Oink Games, as well as many other hats that he wears. Obviously, we are here today with the latest hotness, which is the Spiel Jahres nominated Scout, which I believe has been fantastically shown off this weekend.
It has. It's been a very successful game. We have now sold out and it's been incredibly popular. It was originally designed by Catchup, and then now Oink Games has the worldwide license for that. So we've re-themed it, and yeah, it looks like this. The basic principle: it's a trick-taking card game. Everybody is dealt like a hand of cards, but you can't change the order of the cards. So you'd get dealt a card of hands, which would look like this. And as you can see, the numbers are mixed and not very well ordered. What you're looking to do is play sets and runs. But as we can see, we've got 9, 7, 8, it's all mixed up. But at the beginning of the game, you have the opportunity to flip your entire hand. And on the other side of the cards are different numbers. And then when we rearrange, we've actually got some better options. We've got a pair of 8s, or we've got a 5, 6, 7, which gives us a much better starting hand. We're going to be playing tricks throughout the game. With different circus performers who will have different names and different abilities, and you'll be trying to play tricks, and so you could play a pair of 8s, and then a fellow player would want to maybe play the 1, 2, 3 because the 3 cards would beat the pair, and then you're taking it in turns to play tricks and try and beat each other's tricks. You also have the opportunity that if you can't play a trick and beat the hand that's currently in play, you can scout, which would then involve taking either the top or the bottom card from the trick that is down, and then you add it to your hand. So from this case, I could take the 8, and then I could either add it as an 8 to go for a 5, 6, 7. I could flip it also and use it as a 1 instead to make a 1, 2, 3, or I could keep it with an 8 to perhaps go for the 8, 9 as well. So you have a lot of options, and that's how you manipulate your cards, by placing the scout option rather than just the direct show option. You also have the opportunity once per game to do a scout and show, where you would flip that, and then you can do a scout option immediately followed by a show option. So it's got some nice twists on the traditional trick-taking mechanisms. It uses with the hand manipulation, and it plays very nicely from 2 all the way to 5 players, and the dynamic changes depending on your player count as well. You'll find the gameplay is very different at 5 to how it does at 3 or 2, but all levels still work, and it's still a nice flowing game at both levels.
Yeah, I mean, we've played a couple of games here, 2-player over the weekend. I was lucky enough to pick my copy up first thing Friday morning. It was the first stop.
Yep, it's
as I imagine many people were.
Yep.
So as 2 players, it's still a lovely game. It plays slightly differently with 2, but I imagine the more players you get, it's a very different game, and the type of players you get as well.
Yeah, very much so. So at 3, like this. 2 players has a slightly different setup with how you would scout and use your tokens, but at 3 players you'll find that a game will end when you play a big trick and no one else can beat it. They'll still scout from it, but then it'll be a big trick and no one else can beat it. But in a 4 or 5 player game, you'll find you'll tend to be running out of hands and playing smaller tricks, because everybody, when they do the scout, will be nibbling away at the trick that's been played. Yeah. So if you've got maybe perhaps like a 4 card trick, the first player can't beat 4 cards, but then they'll remove a card, and then the next person only has to beat 3, and then perhaps the next person only has to beat 2 cards. So it gives the opportunity for more cards to be played from your hands, and it plays very nicely.
The one thing we haven't obviously pointed out is that when you are nibbling away with the scout option, you're giving the owner of that trick points.
Yes, exactly. So we have these scout tokens, so every time you do the scout action, the player who played that trick would then get a scout action. Also, if you beat the trick, the cards you beat get taken, and then they come to victory points as well. So you're gaining victory points from playing tricks that are scouted, and also beating the tricks as well. And then at the end of the game, the winner doesn't count their points in their hands, but just takes the bonus point, plus points. And the losers would count the cards they have left over in the hand, but then obviously add the additional points they might have taken from making tricks.
Yeah, and obviously you've got all the point tokens within the game, which have got positive, negative values.
Exactly.
And in our 2-player game, there was a few rounds where there was negative points being scored.
That does happen, and 3 players, that's especially happen. It can be very swingy that way, but you play normally to 20 points or 30 points. Or you can also play the official rule is the set number of players rounds for how many players there are. But again, you can interpret that and play.
It plays so quick that
exactly.
it could be quite one of those games where I imagine that you sit down for an evening and you're like, oh, we'll play a couple of hands, and then before you know it, you're at it for an hour, hour and a half.
Yeah. That is what happened to us on Friday and Saturday. There were a lot of exhibitors who'd had a long day, who were a bit tired, and they ripped out a copy of Scout because it's just light enough, but there's enough strategy in there to think a little bit, but it doesn't melt the brain too much like a full 2-hour game with something a bit more complex would do. Yeah. It's nice, but there's good strategy and good dynamic in there as well.
Yeah, so we're hoping for big things from the Spiel for this one?
Very much so. I think it's 16th of July we find out, and we've got some good competition, but we're hopeful. Yeah. There got a good chance.
And more stock coming over all markets as soon as possible, I assume.
Yeah, so it's in print at the moment. We've sent out for a print order, and there are some stockists in the UK still with stock, and we hope to have more stock coming in August with production times and then lead times. But we're expecting August at the moment.
Yeah. There will likely be a We'll Play game of this coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. But it's not the only game you've got here this weekend.
No, we have many other games, but the main game that we will hopefully be getting into production possibly at the end of this year or beginning of January next year for general distribution is Town 66. So in Town 66, we'll just clear these away. Town 66, we're all inhabitants of a town. Ooh, let's just put that one back on the end there. We're all playing as inhabitants of a town, and we're trying to build a town of curious buildings. There are certain. We're playing cards, which are these cards here. Everybody starts with a hand of 4, and it's hidden information. But on the backs of the tiles, it does show the colours, so other players can see what colours they have. So I can see you've got 2 blue, a green and an orange, but I don't know the symbols on them. What we're trying to do is place them to form up to a 6x6 grid, and there's 2 placement rules. They can't have the same colour or shape in a row or column, and then they have to be directly adjacent. So there's 2 invisible lines here, so you place going right and down, and then you take your token and you look at what positions it could be played. So it's blue, so it could go in this column, but sadly because it's a triangle, it can't go in this row because there's already a triangle in place. So in this instance, we can't actually play this tile because there's no possible position that we can play where it would be legal, because the blues are already taken here, the triangles block off these 2 columns, and then here there's an orange and here there's a blue. So this tile we wouldn't be able to play, but we have other tiles that we could play instead. And then the turn sequence is you play a tile, you would replace it and draw a new tile, and then you have the opportunity to discard a tile. The reason why you want to discard a tile is because the winner of the game is determined by the player at the end with the fewest number of tiles in their hand, which could be 0 tiles, but it might be 1 and 2. Very often with a 3 and 4 player game, you'll have 1 or 2 tiles in your hand. If there's a draw, the player who played last wins the game. Because the game becomes more and more difficult as you progress, it becomes harder to place the tiles, and therefore the game rewards you by sticking it out and playing longer with those tiles. And very often with a 3 or 4 player game especially, it plays solo and it plays at 2 very, very well. This is actually now one of our best 2 player games. You'll find because you're 2, you can plan a bit further ahead because you've got less people placing things that might block where you want to put your tiles. And it's a very, very nice little puzzler. It plays fairly quick. There's a nice little bit of strategy on when do you place, where do you place. And it's been very popular this weekend.
It fits into the Oink model. It's small, it's compact, it's quick, it's relatively simplistic in its design, but execution and strategy level can be a bit higher than what the components give it to.
It's also got some quite nice colorblind friendly elements to it, in the fact that actually the tiles form all the different letters. So we've got an A, B, C, we have a D, we have an E, and then we have a double triangle which actually forms an F. So we've got A, B, C, D, E, F with the tokens, we've got different colours, we've also got the different shapes, there's a pattern system and there's a dotting system. So depending on what kind of visual impairment you might have, as long as you're not severely impaired,
Hopefully something you're going to pick up.
patterns and systems. We've tried to cover it all to make sure it's fully accessible as far as reasonably possible.
No, which is great.
And it's nice. It flows very nicely. And it's our first game that has a proper solo mode to it, which is fantastic. And it's been very, very popular with a lot of pairs and couples, because you can play nicely with each other and semi-cooperatively, but you can also play very competitively and really try and get the strategies right
push, pull, and really laying out the longer game potentially rather than the short game.
Exactly. And there's a lot of different strategies you can take depending on what layout you can have. It's very nice, and it's going to be coming into general distribution. At the moment, we're looking probably just after Christmas.
Okay. Yeah. So hoping for another nomination next year then.
It would be incredible if that got nominated. Scout is a standout game. It's good. It's nice. It's a very nice little puzzler. Very nice portable little puzzler. And think of it as Quirkle crossed with Sudoku. It's
really nice. I mean, obviously we've mentioned Scout a couple of times, but I've popped along to a lot of different tables as we've gone around the weekend, and there's been copies here, copies there, and everybody's got a copy, or most people seem to have a copy, and they're playing through.
It's certainly sold well, and we've got a lot of upset exhibitors because they were too busy to get to the stand, and they've wanted a copy and they've not been able to pick one up. Yeah. But as I said, we have got more stock coming into the UK. It's coming. And it's good. Well, and that is then the last of my stock, so got to get more produced.
Best of luck with the nomination.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today.
Not a problem.
If you haven't already, check out other videos on the channel, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.